Hello, everybody. We're here back with AR Explainer, episode 3. This is the reality of AR in fashion. And we've got with us my old friend, Alex Paulson, CEO of INDE. Hey, how's it going, man?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
All right. And I am Brett Kobe, the host of this wonderful show. We'll have joining us just in a few minutes, Shaba Fragoso, who's the Chief Development Officer at INDE as well. And we will get right into it. So the past few episodes, we've been talking about fashion, retail, and then how augmented reality fits into that. If you check back in the very recent archives, you'll see that we talked about clothing try-on, the state of that technology, everything that is happening in store in great detail right now. We wanted to take that a little bit further tech-wise today and talk not just about augmented reality kind of writ large. And then we've got our buddy Chaba. Hey, man. Welcome.
Hey, sorry for the
No worries. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper on two complementary and really exciting technologies today that kind of transform retail in a smarter way, I would say. So, and help retailers make the use of the space they have. Those technologies, computer vision, and then the smart media and signage that goes along with that. What is all that stuff? We're going to first define all that, and then we're going to talk about why it's useful. So I hope you guys have answers for why it's useful. I bet you do. Because I definitely have some questions as far as that goes. Just to kind of situate things here. So as usual, I am a very, whatever the customer wants, that sounds like great tech kind of guy. And not that you guys aren't, but I usually approach these things from what the heck is that? And just for me to understand that, I wanted to just take us all for a moment to a really giant retail space. This happens to be Macy's at Christmas in Herald Square in New York, now closed for various reasons. So big giant space, lots of people around. You can think of any department store in the world. Macy's just happens to be a very notable example of one. So there's all these different compartments, different places where people can collect, and groups where they can try things on. There's just a whole lot happening there. So and Macy's in Herald Square is an enormous space. It's a city block. So there's so much happening there, probably some of the most expensive real estate in the world. And they really have to make sure they know how to use it best to get the most out of it. And not every retail location is like Macy's, but if you are in 2020 and beyond investing in something brick and mortar, then my guess is you've got to kind of make sure that you're actually getting the most out of it. So essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alex and Chava, today we're going to talk about if you've got a space like this, how you can get the most out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the kind of key point that I think we wanted to touch on, I think it began off the back that we were talking about store windows last week or the week previously. We were talking about the fact that no one's really measuring how much engagement those windows actually get. So if you're talking about a typical US retailer, you may have 500, 750,000 stores. And that was kind of what kicked off this particular episode, was the idea of trying to understand whether what you do inside retail spaces is actually creating any level of engagement at all, or eyeballs for a kind of simpler description.
Okay. So then the way that, my feeble mind was made to understand this, the way I desperately wanted to understand it, I looked for an example that is a little bit more ingrained and a little bit, it's not low tech, it's still very widely used, but most people will be familiar by now with the idea of a website heat map. And this is a very interesting website, which we won't talk about.
But it's sort of improved with the heat part, though.
Right. But essentially,
at least it's not on Flash.
Yeah. So it's not my website or anything, but if you want to head over to businesspop.com
and you use the discount code BrettKobe1.
just full disclosure, I do have an affiliate link set up. But seriously, guys, so what happens with a heat map is that you're able to look at this piece of real estate, because website is in a sense your real estate, and you're able to see where people are clicking, where they're spending more time. In this case, the amount of the redness, or the breadth of the thing of the red there tells you where people are spending their time. So you can figure out from a user experience point of view exactly what's working and what's not. Maybe you put like the call to action in the top left, but no one is ever finding it. So then from the heat map, you'll find out, okay, they want to be right in the center, and that's where you need to build around that. So essentially, computer vision allows you to have a heat map of a physical space with detail that is more than just like, where are people clicking? It's not just red spots, right?
Yeah. So we began work on retail spaces about 2-3 years ago. Trevor and myself, actually. And then we had a couple of members of the team that came in and kind of ran elements of it through the latter part of the development. Our argument was exactly based on that heat map. So the principle is, if your physical storefront is exactly the same as your online storefront, yet you understand very clearly about what works and what doesn't work. You understand if you put more investment into higher quality pictures, then your heat map in your online store will probably tell you that more people look at the pictures and more people click on the pictures, and then potentially that will lead to a conversion. What's not for us, and one thing we began discussing was, well, why can't we apply a heat map to the store, and why can't we do that non-invasively? So why instead of basically asking every single person that goes through every single door what they thought of each part of the store, why can we not measure that effectively remotely? And that was kind of where we kicked off from. And we first looked into computer vision. So the principle of computer vision is that it's a camera that's looking and comparing your face to the library of faces that it contains, and then it's making a relatively educated guess on the person that it sees, and it's comparing them to the library, and then it's saying, okay, my best assumption is that you are, for example, Alexandra here is like 20, or I think it's 25 to 30, female, with a particular emotion, which at the moment, both of them, there's lovely Chava there who's also neutral. So we started to say, well, can we put together a system that allows us to measure what kinds of people are interacting in what kinds of spaces in the store, and then in turn start developing what's effectively a heat map of that, to say, okay, well, you spend, for a US retailer, you might spend, let's say, $100,000 per store window, $50,000 per store window, $25,000 per store window. That is now multiplied by 100, 500,000. But is there any kind of real understanding of how many eyeballs and how much conversion that generated?
Right. So before we kind of talk about where this technology is at right now, I went through my own kind of archives of where computer vision has popped up in the mainstream, in a sense. And while we haven't seen it so much in the fashion space, you may all remember a few years back the concept video for Amazon Go, which was the idea that you would go into a store, or a grocery store, really, supermarket, wherever part of the world you're in, and you walk in just like this lady is doing. You'd scan your phone in some way, and then cameras all over the store would be tracking your movements. They would know, of course, who you are because you've just self-identified. You'd pick up your salad or your yogurt, as she's about to do. Cheesecake, cupcake. I want it. Wait a second. No, I don't. Right? Wait. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
She's back.
Yes. I have seen the video before, so I kind of knew it was going to happen.
All the comedy cues.
Right, and then you walk out, and then in your app you've got the list of everything that you bought. And this was a video from 2016, and surprise, Amazon Go is already a thing, and it does exist. It's at least in New York, and I think it's kind of lumped together with Whole Foods with that whole thing. So let's not get into the whole Amazon thing. But the idea is that, when we're talking about basically using technology to know what people are physically doing in stores, that has been like the first big application of that. But in my mind, I have not seen it go mainstream in with a big fashion retailer, or have I missed it?
Well, I think that one of the important things on why it is not mainstream yet is to understand the kind of industries that is disrupting this kind of technology. Just to this Amazon example is the perfect example of translating what is happening on the web to a physical store. So in the same way, online advertisement is an evolution of offline advertisement, right? So that's why, when we discuss about metrics and so on, impressions was the main reference when you are measuring something. Billboards, all the graphic elements in the store and so on. But that is so dated, but it makes sense on the previous iteration of advertisement. So now what we are we know that, for instance, now billboards and impressions and so on, it's an outdated way to measure this kind of engagement, right? So, but we still see large companies spending a lot of money on these things that you don't have a clear way to measure conversion. So I think that if we translate that to what is happening here on the digital space, we understand why it's more it's being slow to have a mass adoption, because you are disrupting another business model. And I think that's one of the largest challenges.
Yeah, I think that in conversations there's a couple of technologies that are out there to a certain extent and are being potentially deployed fairly widely in places like the US. So one is the door counters. So one is measuring people in and measuring people out, which there's obvious sort of discussion around how effective that is and how useful that is to you to measure the overall traffic in and out the door. And then I think the other thing is then as far as I know, I mean, there's the idea of getting people to download the app, the sort of loyalty app, and then through the loyalty app, you effectively then you're activating your Bluetooth, and then your Bluetooth is then connecting to the beacons that have been placed around in parts of the store. I mean, the reality is that no one's really using it. And I think this beacon thing was something that we all got quite excited about. But there was the one the $1 million sort of catch, which was, hold on a minute, this requires that every user to activate something or allow something on their phone for it to have any information. I mean, it was like, oh yeah, but they'll join the store Wi-Fi. It's like, well, no one joins store Wi-Fi anymore because it's usually more miserable than your sort of 3G connection anyway.
Well, are you not, are you not checking Facebook while you're shopping at H&M? Of course you're not, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. But you just don't. I mean, now we're up 4G and 5G is rapidly approaching. There's no point in joining Wi-Fi anymore.
And it's getting cheaper, so probably the users are tourists, or your persona, your buyer persona gets shrink instead of having the full spectrum of your actual consumers.
Yeah, so I think that's it leads into the idea of okay, so if you're measuring people walking in the door, and then you're measuring your total sales take, then it leaves this huge void in the store. It's other than monitoring traffic flows, and I know, and to add on to that, there are companies that are effectively using the CCTV systems to monitor that, and I think that to me is, well, that's a part of the conversation we'll probably get onto. It's potentially interesting, but it does raise obviously the questions of, okay, what is computer vision actually keeping as data? Yeah. What is the camera retaining or not retaining? When you go through CCTV, you're effectively analyzing a live camera system feed, and then that's presumably analyzed post, which means at some point that data is being kept. So that footage is being kept and analyzed in a third-party system, whether it's on site or in the cloud. so there are a kind of there's people used to get quite touchy about market research. So, oh, can you tell us if you had a good experience today? And you kind of go, yes, I had a good experience, or I had a bad experience. And they say, oh, so can we take your email address? And you go, no, actually, like that's not part of the discussion. And so I think, your data is then the question is then around like, okay, if you're analyzing that information, am I volunteering that information when I walk into the store? Like Amazon, Amazon are particularly savvy at that. I mean, but the principle is that I'm sure you entering a private space in the US means that you've automatically forfeited any right to anything probably anyway. It's a very different kind of approach to the EU.
I mean, sounds fair. Fair.
Well, there's been a really blurred line. There's been a really blurred line there, hasn't there? Because not to get onto the mask thing and not to get onto the whole pandemic thing, but there's been a really interesting kind of set of a group of people who were saying, well, it's my right to do this in here. And I think it's like the store physical space was almost understood by some people to be almost a public space.
Right.
It's an open space and anyone can go in. And that's actually not the case at all.
So just on this idea of I guess the obvious question, especially if you're in Europe, is, okay, what are you keeping of my data and what are you not? So the simpler version of that question is, what are your cameras tracking on me, and when your cameras look at me, what do they actually know about me? So I'm going to put up just a video right here. And we will notice that these are some celebrities, right? There's no audio on this, but you can just kind of... So actually tell me what we're learning about these people right now. What are we knowing? What do we know?
Are you there, Trevor?
Yeah, sorry. Technical problems.
So Chava, the question is, if we watch a video, like the cameras are on these particular people.
Yeah.
What are we learning about them right now?
Well, this is a very interesting approach, because what we are learning is on real time, what is the emotional response of the analyzing, certain features on their faces, basically. So in this specific example, like the parameters that we are measuring is gender, age, and emotional response. With this, what is like really interesting, that instead of just having quantitative data, so like the amount of people's on the screen or so on, we are also getting into qualitative data, so preset targets of emotional response. So what is really interesting when we talk about AI or deep learning, and so this is one of the particular examples of this of applied deep learning into a live camera feed.
Cool. So do we know with computer vision where it stands right now, or else I guess maybe more the INDE vision of it, do we know that we just saw Idris Elba? Or do we know that we saw someone that fits lots of different parameters? Like, what do we actually know now? What have we?
We know that Idris Elba doesn't smile that much, but that's Idris Elba's personality overall, isn't it?
Okay.
He's a tough guy. So I think no. So in principle, so one of the things we went through with Viewpoint. So Viewpoint was the product that we put together to be able to measure people's age, gender, and emotional state in store. So multiple cameras rolled out in multiple parts of the store. And then they're analyzing who it is that they can see, and then providing obviously a heat map, but obviously kind of further kind of analysis of that information. It's all done in real time. But one of the things we kind of went through with this was we can't store any of that data. And Chava will correct me if I don't describe this 100%, but the system is not keeping or storing any material at all, other than the initial feed of the video that it takes through that box, which is localized. And then the only thing that's sent from that box to the cloud is the data, which is effectively, as a camera, I saw 6 22-year-olds, and 3 of them were happy and 2 of them were sad and 1 of them was angry. Is that correct, Chava? I think Chava's feed's cutting out. So I'm going to assume that's correct.
Yeah, and he was perfect. There. Okay, we got Chava back. Hey, buddy.
Hey, man.
So, yeah, it's okay. It's all right. If
Technology.
I can always just remove you if you're.
So I was just saying, Chava, just for you to kind of either back me up or tell me I'm wrong. But one of the issues we went through with Viewpoint was the idea that other than actually the initial feed into the camera, the analysis is made on the device locally and no information is stored. And then the only analyzed data that's sent up to the cloud is basically data that says, I saw 6 people. 3 of them were 25 to 30, 2 of them were X. And that's it. So there's no correlation in between the person.
No, and that was made by design, because like if we discuss about the technology, you can actually assign an ID for the 3 faces that we are checking now. So in a, let's say in a full camera system indoors, you can track every position. Our approach was being concerned about how to make this data anonymous. So basically, for us, it was important just to have the raw data and perform the analysis inside the device. But to make it simple, snapshot, analyze. The snapshot is deleted and just the raw data. But this is happening in real time, so there's no chance to store any image, and that was intentional for us. And
so that's the conversation, Brett, that we talked about with GDPR. So one of the conversations that's come up with a couple of people we've talked to about this is, well, how this doesn't sit well with my GDPR compliance. And it's actually, well, it's not storing anything. It has no link of any data between the person that it sees, or any other information about that person at all. It doesn't store that information either. It's quite a nuanced part of it, and it's something that people often, to a certain extent, misunderstand.
Yeah.
And which is fair, because it's just assumed that computer vision will be something that will be super invasive and therefore will take all my data. But it's not. Nobody. I don't think anyone really wants to. Well, certainly we don't. But no one really wants to be able to analyze the face and then cross-match that against your open Facebook profile, etc.
Right.
I'm sure there's lots of people that probably have thought about it, but it's something for us. Is that there has to be a complete disconnect in between all of those things, and ultimately it would be incredibly useful, I guess, ultimately for retailers to have that information. But the reality, and I think it's a good reality for us to be in, is that there's enough data coming anonymized for them to make good decisions.
Exactly. And we are witnessing in real time what happens when you don't take under consideration in the design part this kind of ethical questions, So that is something that we are learning day by day, how this sharing our information, and in this situation, our own face could potentially be not very good,
Yeah, I think that he's back. He's back.
Oh,
talking of faces.
Yeah, I had
missing face.
It's nice to have your office next to a playground. And I'm trying to ventilate to be safe. And
Fair enough.
I mean, we got the masks, we got the sanitizer, and we're ventilating. But sometimes it messes with the sound quality. So what can you do? So I disappeared for a second. Yeah. But I was.
We were talking about the ethics of it, and I think it doesn't sit in GDPR.
Right.
And as difficult as that is to understand, it's something that we had to think about and think, well, hold on a minute. If we've gone to the levels that we've gone to in terms of not storing any information and not linking any information to anyone or anything,
right,
then technically this is not related to that. It's not related to GDPR. It's not related to data privacy. Yeah, and if it's not recording.
Right. It's not a video feed, right? It's not like you've got footage that it's learning something, but it's not, you're not going to have terabytes and terabytes of actual video with people.
It will be more expensive to storage something that you won't be using either way. Right. So that is.
But it's a hard conversation to have because the assumption immediately is like, well, it's a camera, it's looking at me, it knows who I am because it's told you that I am 38. And you think, well, Yeah, it doesn't know you though. All it does is is effectively just going, my best guess based on the 5,000 images that I have is that you are approximately fitting into this box.
Okay.
And that's a huge difference.
So based on that, can you guys talk me through what is being learned right now and then how that's being used, right?
Yeah. So this is the other product that we've been in development with. And it's something that I've always been quite excited by and always kind of slightly fascinated that there's not more of it in the world yet. But obviously we talked earlier on about market research. We talked about understanding what products people buy, trying to understand, the Unilevers of this world, for example, kind of pouring millions and millions of dollars into understanding what motivates you to buy a particular, brand of crisps or drink or et cetera, et cetera. So for us, one of the kind of keys of using the computer vision technology was to say, okay, if we've analyzed this data, then that's useful data for me to understand in my market research team, et cetera. Now, what would happen if we had that data and we could make decisions live in the store? And so how can we use that data effectively to either increase people's awareness of a complementary product, for example, or increase awareness of a product that's targeted to a particular demographic? And so the principle's the same, but it's then connected up to a display, which is calling a content management system, which is then saying, okay, if you're in front of this particular area, then I need to adapt my advertising to advertise to you specifically. So Chava and I will buy different deodorant. And so therefore that's probably not a good example because we're not that much different in age, but basically the difference between me at 42 and someone at 20, there's a couple of years difference, but not that much. So the difference between a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old sitting in a particular aisle, let's say both male, then effectively you want to advertise a product that's more likely to appeal to me if I'm standing there. Mm-hmm. And that's, to me, reactive media display is something that I think is inevitable, because you should be making the same display screen work 6 times as hard.
Right.
And I think that's where we were heading with it. That's where we're heading with it.
Okay, so then if we can go back to Macy's for a second, and I want you, before we go there, this is a bit on the spot thing that we have not.
I'd love
planned.
to go to Macy's right now.
Well, there you go.
I'd swim.
Oh, but just look at all those people in this Macy's. Are you going to be like?
I know, but I'm assuming the pandemic doesn't exist, and
yes.
it would be like, oh yeah, that'd be nice. It's Christmassy. It's New York.
Enter the alternate reality.
Yeah.
of a Macy's that is open, full of people, and it's completely safe, and you don't feel weird. Yeah. And so look around here and just think. Can you kind of talk me through how this would look differently if computer vision was a thing? With or without these displays, the real-time signage.
Chava, you want to go first?
Well, yeah, definitely. Like considering that we have camera, like you see this wonderful, LED display there. So let's say that a certain time in the day that the demographic change because whatever reason. So you can launch a dedicated campaign in that screen just by understanding who is the people in your location. So that will be one specific example. This little figure that we just saw of them, it was a policeman or something like that. So again, if someone is paying attention to him, he can trigger a specific message. So with this, everything that seems to be dynamic just because it has motion, it can create a communication channel, with the audience, with the people that is there. So that is a basic principle of how, by understanding the audience, you can trigger messages via a digital signage in a specific location in real time.
So just one thought here, right? So Macy's, as I said, was at least the one in Herald Square in New York, was the one full city block, several stories, huge space. The reality of today is that those spaces are, they're becoming nice to haves for a retailer. So if you're thinking now about purchasing or renting retail space, there must be a way that if you're smart with technology, this sounds like I'm feeding you the answer that I want, but it's not. There must be a way that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Brett.
Yeah, interesting.
They're putting it like in yes.
Right. Part of this is coming off a bit infomercially, but we really did not plan it this way.
We're going to lead back to that website in a minute, aren't we? The one we're like, by the way.
And that's how I convert everybody. This whole thing is a heat map for me. And I'm the hottest.
I know.
So just to say, like, if you want, could you, in the computer vision world, could you maybe take 1/10 of giant Macy's, all right, and then using technology actually make it work just as hard as the other 9/10?
Yeah.
Is it possible, or do you still need the space?
But I think, to go back to your first point, like retailers are going to have to work much harder. I mean, the stories that are coming out of places like Manhattan, for example, where brands are saying, you know what, like we spend $3 million a month on rent on this space, and it's been a lot. It's basically branding. It's lost us money for the past 15 years. I think that as kind of the economic kind of slowdown does kick in and people spend less money, then retailers are currently going through that portfolio and saying, okay, which stores work and why do they work? And it's not just about location. Some of it is about what is positioned in the store at any given point in time, how they adapt content in real time. And I think the really, really smart retailers will start questioning and saying, well, yeah, I know we've always done this, but have we ever actually, other than just asking people on the street, have we ever actually measured how many people? I think that Macy's example is a good one. So one of the things that Viewpoint's going to tell you for Longchamp or whoever else was in that is that, does anyone look at your window? I mean, does anyone actually look at it? And that's the case for every single person. And then you need to multiply that all the way through it for every single brand. And as you've got to multiply that all the way through to then install it. How much money do you spend on the store design? And are you measuring the results of that? And the data I imagine the data would be horrifying in terms of, we have a 1,000 square meter space.
Mm-hmm.
And we have entire dead spots, which technically could just be shut or closed or turned into just an experience piece, which would be more interesting.
Yeah, and considering that, we start to see the need also on those spaces to be ready for Instagram, right? And that's another way of measuring it. So they are putting a lot of effort just to capture that moment. And hopefully, like the people that is uploading to their Instagram will put the hashtag. And they're starting going to measure, but they are not measuring what's happening on the space. They're just measuring afterwards what it's, hopefully creating awareness, but in completely different media that you don't even own. So something that can, leverage what's happening on location. I think that is needed because the reality is that they are investing a lot of money just to capture this moment, and then it gets unidimensional again.
I think you've got to shift product. I mean, that's what they're there for, and that's
not just desire.
No, exactly, yeah, and ultimately the numbers are per store, per day, per hour, per day, per week, per month, per store. And I would imagine some of them are kind of quite terrifying to look at. And I think that it doesn't feel like in conversations that you have, it still feels like the physical departments of a brand and the digital departments of a brand they're not working against each other, but they don't complement each other in the way that they should, because there's still this kind of feeling of okay, well, you're here to effectively replace what I do.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's not the case. But it is kind of quite arresting to hear it. To hear that people aren't looking at that kind of technology and using it to their advantage, because if you know that a particular display that you spend a very relatively low budget on works really well, then the second part is the analysis of why does that appeal to so many people? What is it visually, or what is it, whether it's a piece of technology or whether it's literally just a massive inflatable Santa? And
That is red, and it cuts your
if it's a
attention.
massive inflatable Santa, and that Santa gets 22 times more eyeballs than the other display, which costs 6 times as much, then you kind of need to ask yourself the question. And I remember years and years ago, I don't think brands particularly understand their retail customers very well. I still don't think they do. And I remember years and years ago working at Maxim magazine and going to Maxim magazine was staffed by a chunk of media kids, as we all were in London. And then the new editor came in and he said, "Oh, I want to organize a readers party, and I want all the readers to come, and I want all the staff to go, and I want them to be able to meet all of the staff." And it was one of the most enlightening nights I've ever been. Just to realize, so you were writing for someone and you were creating for someone. You had a persona in your head that you decided that was who was going to like, and then you met them, and it wasn't that.
Right.
I'm not going to say much more than that, but you were agonizing over nuances about how you wrote stuff and how you made things sound. But the truth is that you didn't have a really clear understanding of the kind of people that were in the room. And I suspect a lot of times this is happening in retailers high and low. I don't think they have a great picture of it at all.
Because so bottom line, I've never run a retail store myself, but my sense is, if I think of the metrics that they're probably looking at on a daily basis or weekly, or even I don't know, 10 years ago, they would have said, okay, we've got sales on a daily basis, we've got sales on a weekly basis. We figured out either whether maybe it's a clicker, how many people are coming in and out, even if they did that, like our turnstile, whatever, right? So they know traffic and they know sales. So that's 10 years ago. In the meantime, they would have maybe their system can now account on an hourly basis. They can even use Google to figure out when traffic is highest in their store or not. So they've got that information. So they know their peak hours, even if they're not doing clickers or turnstiles. Google has got that for them. I don't know how easy that is to access. And even more recently, they would have added, okay, the marketing people got involved and they say, we're going to go completely digital and physical, and we're going to add an Instagram activation and track hashtag usage for your campaign, right? So I'm probably being overly simplistic, but do you feel that is kind of the default state of retail metrics and how they size up? Should we keep this? Should we invest in this store? Should we close this store? Or are they looking at other stuff too that I just don't know about?
Not that I'm aware of. Chava may know of a lot more information they're using, but
no, it seems to be like very, very accurate in a simple level. I mean, it comes again of I won't say that not understanding the digital world, but keeping it separated. So I'm going to my previous point on the previous episode. It's about the consumer, and the consumer now is both. This is digital and physical. So by keeping the metrics just on one side of the equation, you are missing like the connection point. And it's like, from my perspective in the research that we have been doing, like there's still this disconnection. There's still this way of measuring that. Okay, at the end of the day, yeah, it's conversion in a physical space. But how can I arrive there? In digital, we know the funnels. Like, it's already established from many years how you bring consumers' attention into a conversion. So applying a little bit of this bridge between both worlds, I think it's already necessary.
And it seems like I think that's a really cool comparison, because if I look at where we are now in terms of the mainstreamness of, say, Facebook ads, right? So every brand will use that. And by now, everyone has played with Facebook Ads Manager. They've A/B tested posts based on engagement rates and video views, and that kind of the concept of knowing of having some assumptions and then testing them on some personas, and then seeing what works is very ingrained now. Like if I talk A/B testing, 10 years ago, not that I was doing it 10 years ago, 5 years ago I was, and now everybody knows what I'm talking about now, right? And people have even heard of personas. Sometimes they love to debate personas, good, bad thing. That's another thing. The fact is that they are happening, and that is the model of social media and that kind of thing. So why do you think that we've been able to get on board with basically the same exact toolkit that you're talking about? Like we're on board in the social media space, just to simplify that, and then even the Google, the search ad space and everything. Why is it not taking hold in the physical world? Why are those still two different jobs and two different tracks not talking to each other?
Well, firstly, it's much harder to deploy. So if you think about how the Facebooks of this world, the social media giants of this world arrived and offered the tools very quickly. It's just like saying an A/B kind of HTML mailers out. You just click whether you want to do that or not and create two. Obviously, you're talking about a physical space. I don't think the technology has necessarily been there. It's still not literally one click. So it's not a question of you just buying into some network and then just going bam, now I have all my data. And then number two, I think, is probably the fact that you're talking to two different groups of people, and I'll kind of keep nameless, but an example of a conversation that I've had and I've been involved in, which was dealing with people. There were a team of people who were responsible for designing the physical storefronts. And what you were doing was sitting in a room talking to them about how you could effectively remove all of that and replace that with, digital signage or et cetera, et cetera. And then the other part of that story was, okay, well, why don't we just measure your physical installations then? Why don't we just measure how many eyeballs it gets? And there's a fair amount of reluctance because people kind of know that, look, I've been doing this for 10 years and I don't really want to stop doing it. But at the same time, I'm not sure I really want to hear the harsh truth, which is that it doesn't work as well as it used to. And if you have a rival brand next door who have deployed a lot more of this kind of knowledge of engaging younger people, for example, you to a certain extent, you're fighting a slightly losing battle.
Going on the first point that Alex mentioned, like we opened the show with the Amazon store. Like that's the perfect example of like a digital first approach to design a physical store. The amount of technology going there, it's huge. That's why we are not seeing like more of those examples. Amazon can afford it. Amazon can A/B test like $1 billion business just like that. Not everyone can afford it. We recently shared a link about the new approach of Walmart, that it's the one that can compete with Amazon on this kind of stores. And it was like the headline, it was something like the new digital approach for the physical stores of Walmart. It was interesting, but if you see it, it's like really, really like trimmed down comparing with the Amazon store. It was your loyalty application, like how can I navigate the store, not even AR, like just how can I go to product B, how can I scan my product, how can I consolidate my online shopping list with the physical shopping list. If you see it like with all the tools that are available, it's not that revolutionary, but they know their customers and they know that probably having something a la Amazon store, it will be disrupting for their business. So they need to have this onboarding process because their consumers are already like buying online. How can they translate that to a territory that they know pretty well, that is the physical store? I think that's a perfect example. It measures like what is the bet in terms of a large rollout instead of just a store sample in Seattle.
I think it's I think it's a good point. I think one of the things that we've kind of been conditioned over the past 10 years is the idea that technology kind of it arrives in one hit. So it's like ta-da, that now has now changed. But actually, I haven't seen anything that really isn't a step on from something else. Most of the time, the best pieces of tech out there, the best experiences out there, are usually an evolution, and that's kind of something that I think sometimes we get a bit lost in. You don't have to eat the whole elephant straight away. You can arrive and say, you know what, first off, I'd just like to know if, for example, we could have a little bit more in-depth real-time information about the kind of people that we have in the store and what they're doing and where they're going, where they're not going. That's actually, I mean, there's an argument that's in terms of what you can potentially do, that's actually quite, it's actually this much along the pipe. But imagine how useful that would be to the majority of retailers out there. So
it's almost as if you do, even if you didn't go all in, okay, and say, I'm transforming my whole retail business so that it is super smart. I know everything about every square centimeter. That's one thing, and that does cost a certain amount of money and back end development or whatever. But even if you just did like a 1 month audit or a test, or you took one corner of the store where there's a lot of traffic, and stuff is happening, and maybe you would be that. It sounds like if you were in charge of saying yay or nay to keeping a store open or opening a new store, or designing the schematic for every new store, then you would be pretty well served to do something like that, instead of just saying like, you didn't sell well this week or this month, so therefore buy, right? I mean, you got to think it through a little bit more, right?
I think so. I mean, I think there's an awareness thing. I think I mean, CFOs are probably having fairly awful meetings right now in US retail, worldwide retail, but US retail particularly. There's nothing pleasurable about what they're having to do. I'm sure they're not enjoying any of it. But at the same time, it feels like with things like computer vision, with View, etc., it's like, hold on a minute. There are more parts of information that we need to look at, and there are parts of information that should be relevant to you, other than just, okay, how much money does this store make per week, compared to basically how much rent they pay per month. There are some flagships exist for a reason, and I think there needs to be a discussion around what. Obviously, they're probably going through this right now and saying, well, hold on a minute, we need certain stores that are the sort of tentpole. But they're often actually not the ones that make that much money. They often lose money. But you got to have a better understanding of the customer. I think it's insane to assume that you know what they want, because often I think the reality is that you don't.
And we're also looking at, as much as people definitely want to go back to the way things used to be, I think we're in the middle of such an extended period of uncertainty about what we can do from the day to day, that we can't help but, as humans, to have some kind of behavior shift in how we interact with environments, right? So even if we would today give a survey, take a survey and say, how are you going to change your habits post-pandemic? And be like, not at all, forget that, I will do me, right? And in reality, something's going to change, right? So that right. So then, how do you harness that?
Well, I think it's also a question of, I mean, that answer that you just gave is the answer that people want to give, but it's not the truth. The truth is that all three people in this call are going to retail stores less. In fact, I've only been back into kind of fashion retail really in the past sort of 30 to 40 days, which is quite rare for me. And that's something that it's happening whether you like it or not. But if you ask me, would I like it to get back to normal? I would of course say, yeah, it's we're nearly there. It's like, but it isn't. So there are going to be lots of changes like that, I think.
Yeah.
Chava's nodding like, yeah, you are wearing the same T-shirts that you always wear.
Chava absolutely kills black T-shirts. He is the master of black T-shirts.
But Chava's noticing of you, Alex, that you don't have any new ones in the lineup, maybe because you haven't been to a physical store.
Yes,
because I'm just guessing T-shirts. I actually have no idea. Maybe you're a sneakers guy.
I think he's good on T-shirts. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I go shopping with Chava quite a lot.
And do you
yeah.
for T-shirts?
A funny story about like a forced visit to an outlet just to kill time while we were waiting for some COVID results.
Yeah.
So the only thing that we could do is to go to an outlet. So that was funny.
And Chava just spent his entire time wandering around looking for places that stocked black T-shirts. And actually came out with one, if I remember rightly, or two, maybe. Two, actually. Yeah.
Chava, when you're buying your black T-shirts, do you mind if you do that on the internet, or do you prefer to go to a physical place and touch them, look at them? Tell me the mystery.
Like for instance, like spoiler alert, this T-shirt is new.
Mm-hmm.
I bought it online.
Okay.
But if I had to choose, I would love to buy this in the shop, but I can't. Like in my location, like my preference, it will be I want to go there. Why I bought it? Because
have you spent less on clothing in the past 6 months than you did the previous past 9 months? God, it's 9 months now.
I must prompt to have to buy on physical location a larger amount. Like my online shopping, it's a little bit more.
From the same places.
So
I have not. I've not taken on any more textile inventory at all.
I think if you work, I think you work on the principle that there's a good washing machine in the house, then you only need like 3 T-shirts, really.
Yeah, I mean, one pair of shoes. As I was saying, I just got my first haircut, so. And I think that what many people have learned is that there is a way. There is another way to live your daily life, but it keeps changing so much that no one can actually. You wouldn't. If you ask me what my daily life looks like and what will look like for several months, 6 months ahead, I have no idea. So I couldn't give you that. So the only thing that you would know about me is that if you followed me around and then took pictures of me in the store without actually taking my face, and then you would kind of know what exactly a almost 40-year-old man is doing in that store, because he's right now you would see me like, okay, got to get in, got to get out, don't really want to be here.
But that's huge. No, I mean that's the thing that has kind of harmed US retail, I think, so much, has been that there's the people left shopping are the ones that are going to buy something. So they are okay. I want to get a version of this, and I know where to get it, and I'm going to go.
Not the browsers.
Yeah. So it's such a huge kind of hobby in the US in terms of people going there, and then kind of a lot of conspicuous consumption that happens as a consequence of that. And you buy food, but then you also go and buy. You will buy the T-shirt you don't need, and you will buy potentially a pair of sneakers that are a slightly different color to the ones you've already got. No names mentioned, Chava. But I think that part of it has changed fundamentally. I think it's not at the moment, and it certainly hasn't been for a while. It's not really a viable hobby. Most people have kind of shelved it and gone, you know what, I'm not going to walk around in that space unless I have to go in to get something. I'm happy now to go in to get something, but I'm not going to go and wander about and maybe buy 2-3 things.
That may be the most clarity that I have actually heard on the topic, is that shopping is no longer a viable hobby.
Yeah.
And now what? And now what?
And now what are you going to do? Yeah.
What are we supposed to do?
Where
I mean, I'm thinking I'm from Middle America.
Cleveland.
When it rains or snows and it's winter, the thing that you do is you go to a store. That's what you do. That's the thing that you do. There isn't everywhere. You're just going suburbs. You're going from store to store, and that's kind of what life is. It really is a hobby. So if we're looking at coming up on this point in time where all of those brick and mortar stores, what did we hear just yesterday? Regal Cinemas shutting down a whole chain, right? That's huge. I mean, that's where went all the time as a kid. You know, in the visit that I've got coming up, that was going to be down the street from where I was staying. I was like, not really what I want to do right now, but I'm glad it's there.
Yeah.
And now it's gone, right? So that's going to happen more and more with these giant big box stores, I think, is that they're just not going to be able to support all of those locations, right? So I think that naturally just market forces are going to create a shift in what's even available for the American hobbyist shopper, right?
Yeah.
And that it really is a big part of the American suburban lifestyle, is to be able to go do that. So
but the more companies are going to have to become experience companies. More brands are going to have to become spaces that do all of it under one roof. Yeah. You need to be able to shop, you need to be able to eat. In fact, shopping will be the consequence of you being there and having fun. So it will be a theme park, and it will be A, B, C, and D all rolled into one, and there will be less of them, and they'll have to be more ruthlessly efficient about how they get money out of your pocket, which is what they do. And they're probably going to have to do it in different ways. So they're going to have to, you know, they'll have, rather than just know that you're, if you,
not like a theme park, you know, like that you pay once
one entrance.
The thing.
Imagine that. I mean, one of them just turns up, they buy all the brands, and then they say, right, it's just a season pass. So you can just come in and you can buy one piece of clothing from every single store. And then you can do that 3 times a month. And then you pay like whatever, $500 a month, and you can, and then it gets you the cinema, it gets you the food, it gets you the
#pitch deck.
The best
are we pivoting?
The only thing that could make what you described better is that if at the beginning of that experience you have to buy some itchy and scratchy money.
Yeah.
And and then I'm just kidding.
Disney, Disney dollars basically, and then you've kind of all joking aside, they are already thinking about it. I think, and there's some of them are getting there, but it's not there yet. They're having to rework the business. You can't just build the roof and put the shops in it anymore.
No, because it won't work. And the funny thing is that like 2 years ago, that was like the idea, like the future of shopping or retail, it will be experience. And it's just like for years and years, it was just the future. And now it's like a little bit of being forced to, but I need this. Like, do you have any other choice?
No.
So in summary, shopping currently as it is no longer a viable hobby. This will inevitably, give this plus market forces will inevitably give rise to the need to create this ruthlessly efficient experience. Comments to the ruthless efficiency of Amazon online will have to happen in a physical space, because they're squeezing you for everything, right? So you're going to have to do that too, but in a way that feels very fluid, and that the shopping becomes just a side effect or the sideshow to the actual experience. Yeah. And if you're going to do that in a physical space, you're just going to have to be smarter about what you actually need and what you don't, because bottom line, you probably can't afford it. So you're going to have to make some choices. Is that kind of where we're at right now?
It seems a bit dystopian, but it does.
Everything is this year. Everything is dystopian.
It's the theme of 2020.
I mean, this is not an inspirational show. This is about the reality.
This is the reality of what happened.
Okay.
I think it's a fair assumption. I think the ruthlessness will have to come by understanding what people want from physical space more. And I think that's and that would, I think it would lead to, honestly, I genuinely believe it will lead to much better retail. I think a chunk of it is relatively lazy, and I think it's time to kind of rethink what a store represents to you. And it needs to be a brand, and it needs to be experience, and it incidentally needs to carry product.
Yeah. And it's so funny how it just switched, right? So you remember when we used to go to the internet to have fun? Not anymore. Like we need to go to Amazon to get the things done. We need to go to like your shopping list to get things done. And if now this retail space is turned into the place where I can go have fun, like some consequence can come from that.
And now most of it, we go to the internet to destroy our mental health. So dystopian 2020. and buy things, right? So, but these things are compatible, so it's totally fine. And 2020 is a good year. A lot of things are going to look up next year for sure. In the meantime, people have just got to be smart in how they pivot, right? So, guys, we're awesome discussion once again. As usual, the three of us had fun. We never know what the audience thinks. Just kidding. The audience has been.
We'll need to start measuring that more effectively.
Yes. So, wait till next episode. There's going to be a heat map of this video, and you're going to see just where the heat was and who brought the heat and who did not bring the heat. We're going to see hot and cold, and we're going to make smart decisions based on that about the future of this series.
And we'll fire the one with the lowest heat.
Yes, the bottom 20% has to go. So I'm just kidding.
It's like Hunger Games.
No, anyway, bring it back. All right, guys.
We need the diversity quota, remember.
Wow. Well, we can't argue with that. So, all right, guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll see you on the next episode of AR Explainer. Bye, everybody.